Full disclosure, Part 2 of this series was originally supposed to be about the Omniverse's supreme creator, the Overmind as I've so named it. But since I had to delete a lot of important content from Part 1 in the name of not making a novel out of a notepad, the order of things has had to be rearranged a bit. What you're about to hear is an excerpt from my newest ongoing literary project, The Tao of Grimdark, since, rather than rewrite the whole lot for no reason, I can make my point and also advertise in the same turn. And as long as I'm here multitasking, I'm going to quickly plug the Everyman's MechTech Bible again. It's the totality of my research notes, scripted takes, and illustrations from along the MechTech series journey. Also, for those who like the more philosophical side of my work, I'll throw out there my very first anthological work, The Noble Ape, sort of a collection of essays outlaying my own personal thesis on life, the universe, and everything, now incorporating my 100-odd video scripts on similar and/or related subjects. But anyway, enough with my shilling. On with the show. The Omnisphere is a bubble raptured by an infinitely many potentiality spheres, each and all a vibrational orchestra composed of innumerable threads of soul matter, existential prima materia, the first substance, strained from the absence of non-canonical, non-conforming, non-binary, inorganic, impossible a priori, non-essential eternal oblivion. The all is truth, the all is one, the all is itself, and in itself it can make a hell of heaven, a heaven of hell, can make eternal slumber out of death itself, and in its strange, lonely, transcendent epics, even eternity will meet its end. All is nothing, because all was born from nothing. By this reasoning, we conclude the truth of the holographic principle, that our lowly quanta vibrational status is no more than a mere mirage, a fiction, a phantasm, a flicker of a blink of the all-seeing, all-knowing, all-thinking, unblinking, evil black eye at the center of all creation. We may then deduce that our efforts are not merely fleeting, but pantomimic projections of an all-power so vast, so eccentric, so overpoweringly impressive that we are unworthy to even attempt to calculate its operational parameters. Not only have our fates been drawn and traced vigintillions of eons prior to our nascence, but the very substance of our being itself is but an amorphous, androgynous fiction. We are but the scattering of starlight upon the ocean, the prismatic illusion cast by the omnipresent demon Sultan itself, that vast convalescence that is the Tao, the way, that is the center of all life, the hub of the wheel, the reaver and gardener of souls, the devourer of death itself. Be afraid, or don't. It won't matter. Nothing matters. For you and I, we are nothing at all. We are but infinitesimal specks of thought, barely thoughts, barely whims, barely hints of flickers of specks of happenstantial concepts. The cosmos is vast, incomprehensibly immense, but it is not that vastness or incomprehensibility which have drawn our lines in its sand. No, it is the enormity, the dreadful depth, the inexorable certainty of its grimdark truth, that all-encompassing reality that we are not only in a simulation, but that we are simulations, that has driven men and gods alike irretrievably mad. For the full idea of an omniverse to come into order, a few critical definitions need to be laid down first. However, in the interest of time, I'll simply keep this panel of definitions up on screen going forward for your convenient reference. What must be understood is that the Omniverse is less of an orderly staircase as a frothing pot, whose roiling bubbles percolate up and down, for want of better terms, the realms, their logical waves and ripples precipitating the various realities, both material, physics, and metaphysical, magic. When we combine all of these, we arrive at this model, the starkest pattern of which you'll notice is the cyclical Ouroboron trend between void and void. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, nothing begetting nothing, God seeing himself reflected and knowing himself in turn. The core identity of the phenomenological side of the coin is determinism, or as modern physics has, for reasons beyond my ken, elected to call it superdeterminism, while the simulacrum's identity is fantasy, abstract projections coalescing, their radiant energies building and cancelling out until a field of mostly static particulate clumps remain. These then converge over eons to produce what we know as matter, and all that therefore derives. And now that we have our building blocks all neatly arranged, we can begin to properly assemble our model. In essence, every universe is a reality bubble nested within a multiversal, which are themselves nested within the greater omniverse. Each and all undergo periodic cycles of growth and collapse, heretofore christened by me as magnates or great ones. In essence, the Omnisphere can be envisioned as a perpetual, omnidirectional drain cycle, with one half being an outward substantial expansion of phenomenological, material reality, bubbles towards the eternal vacuum, void, followed by a second simulacrum, abstract collapse phase, where the internal void draws the abstract projections of the material shell down into its perpetual maw. Nature abhors a vacuum almost as much as it abhors a paradox. So in both cases, the void pulls, it consumes, it wants, it hungers. In the phenomenological substantia arc, it stretches and strains realities from their omnipotent nucleus. To use a potent metaphor, the nothing rips the very soul out of God, and in so doing, it divides attuned instruments into bands, amiable rhythms into harmonies, suitable melodies into songs, and so forth. The cycle between substance and simulacra is that of projector and projection. Basically, like a stone impacting water, material substance projects chaotic patterns through an incorporeal medium. These patterns interact, converge, merge, submerge, and cancel each other out, like pond ripples, to create a sense of coherency that lacks internal locality. Sort of like how a video game's characters, environments, textures, mechanics, etc. are all just the intangible projections of electrical pulse patterns in the computer's material processor. Eventually, however, the projections grow dense enough to acquire substance, sort of like how a star's fuel grows dense enough to stop fusing after a period, and so take on their own intrinsic localized coherency. In essence, the projections become the projector. The constant of entropy produces a new generation of projections, and thus the cycle begins anew. Forgive me if this all sounds wildly vague and eccentrically esoteric. Considering the nature of the subject, there's only so much that can be helped, even notwithstanding my own irredeemable wont for poetic flair. The tragedy of being a human who's fluent in only one language lies in my vocabulary being sufficient only to address topics of cultural and historical familiarity, which is an erudite way to say that I'm not only attempting to describe what, so far as I can tell, is a fundamentally underexplored territory in the modern West, but also relay it in a way that won't require me to attach an entire proprietary dictionary to the end of this section. Now, the most prominently interesting feature of this cyclical journey is that, contrary to what intuitive analysis would initially suggest, despite being themselves subject to phenomenological laws, a projector's analogous circuits can in fact produce holographic patterns of effectively random noise. That's what that grainy gray static is on a literal movie projector. Individual pixels being stimulated at random, meaning that the patterns in the projections are not necessarily dependent upon, or indicative of, the patterns of the projector itself. I could, and have, gone on for several more pages, but for the sake of your time and my sanity, I'm going to call this schizophrenic episode here. As usual, if you're one of the weird people who wants to listen to me rant about nonsense for another 10 minutes, let me know in the usual ways and places. And if you want to own some of my esoteric takes and/or ramblings for yourself, consider checking out my books on Amazon, or perhaps just leave me a tip in the form of a super thanks, or become a channel member for access to exclusive polls, early access to videos, and so on. And as always, until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and remember, life's too short to be taken seriously. Peace.